Hello, welcome to SBA Live. I hope everyone had a great Easter last week and probably spring break for a few people this week or last week or next week. So that's always a fun time to spend some time with the family and get away. Of course, in the funeral profession, it feels like you can never truly get away. It was a little bit difficult. But I want to introduce Nikki. Nikki works for Full Circle Aftercare. She's been with us for several years. She is invaluable and just absolutely wonderful. And she is our director of operations. And I am Matt Van Drummelin. I'm the founder and owner of Full Circle Aftercare. And I am actually calling you from Europe. And this picture behind me are the tulip fields that we rode through just right before Easter with the kiddos. So it was lots of fun. And anyway, I hope everyone's doing a great time, having a great time. And next week we will see you all at ICCFA.
We'll
So
both be
Nikki,
there.
why don't you That's right. Nikki, why don't you introduce our subject today?
All right. Well, today we're going to do a deep dive into something that most people are very afraid of, which is Social Security. So, Social Security, I do have some slides. We can put these up here. Here we go. How to deal with Social Security is how most people put it, because working with Social Security always feels like a chore. And that's the truth.
I
Always.
agree.
So,
I think that this is, for some reason, almost every person I've ever helped has just been so stressed about Social Security. Like they feel like they are not going to do it right. They feel like they're going to miss things, and they feel like this like juggernaut that they have to go and fight against to figure out what's going on.
yes, I actually feel there is a cultural fear of Social Security, and we could talk for a
Yeah.
long time why I think that's there. But today we'll just focus on why, like when it came to be, why it's there, what it's supposed to do for families, and then how we are able to help them make sure they're getting the right benefits. So, a lot of people don't know the history of Social Security. It was actually signed into law as the Social Security Act by President Roosevelt in 1935. So if you think of the time frame, that's like Great Depression era, when everyone in the country had gone through really, really hard things. And there was not a system in place to take care of certain types of the class of people in the country. So Social Security is the term used when we're discussing old age, surviving family members, and disability insurance in the United States. It's run by the Social Security Administration, a federal agency, and it's best known for its retirement benefits, but it provides other benefits, which we're going to get into today. So I do have a little stat there that last year over 71 million Americans collected benefits last year.
Wow. That's a ton.
It's
That's a
huge.
huge number.
Yes, it's huge. Um, Social Security retirement, there's different kinds of Social Security benefits available out there. So, the benefit for retirement is the monthly check that replaces your income when you decide to retire. Social Security is not always going to be enough money to actually cover your expenses. So, it still requires you to do some long term planning beforehand so that you're not just stuck with whatever when you hit retirement age, which we've seen before, haven't we, Matt?
Yeah. Yeah, we have. Absolutely.
Yes. So the amount of your average earnings for Social Security depends on the earnings that you made during your lifetime. So they have like an equation of what that amount is. So it's not the same amount for every person who
That's right.
has their retirement benefit.
Yeah,
So the
and
retire
it's about 40 quarters is how they calculate that out. So they take your whole history of work and they do it by quarter, not by month or paycheck or anything like that. And then they do the highest 40 quarters. So the highest 10 years worth of work. But you do need a minimum of, I think, 18 months, right? I think you need six or eight quarters um, in order to get any kind of benefits. So you do have to have some work out there, but I know it's 40 quarters is how they calculate out the highest, the highest of those. in overall in order to get that benefit, and then that is prorated depending on when you take it. So if you take it a little bit earlier, you get a little bit less, but you get it for a few more years. If
Yes.
you take it later, then you'll get a higher amount, and that eventually maxes out to where they force you to take it.
Absolutely. And the equations and mathematical things they use to make all of that make sense on their end is entirely confusing to every
Yes,
person. Yeah. So with us, it's a lot of the planning. If you have a financial advisor, they're going to really talk you through
absolutely.
what's best for your own situation and when to take that and when not to. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the families we help are in the category of being widow or widower. And so
Right.
they're in that window, or maybe slightly before that window of actual retirement benefits, where there's other benefits available that can be pulled from those records.
Yeah.
So
About a
the
year ago, I had my uncle call me, and he's like, "Matt, I know you deal with all this stuff. I need to know when to take my Social Security." And I said, "Uncle Craig, if you die, have Aunt Madeline call me. But until that moment, I cannot advise you on when to take it. You really need to talk to a financial planner, and that they're so good at this. If you get a really good financial planner who's worth their salt, they can truly help families make these decisions because it will impact them in a huge way."
Yes, and then once they've already done all that planning, when one spouse or the other actually passes away, that's when benefits will change. One of
Right.
the biggest things that we see on our end is even though people are married, it doesn't necessarily mean their records are linked. So
Right.
there's plenty of cases where both parties, both spouses are drawing their retirement benefit. One of them passes away, and the other one just still keeps claiming their current benefit. So that's where we see that stat that we throw out all the time
Whew.
to all of our families, that 82% of widowers who don't receive their Social Security benefit, that they fall in that category where they don't bother to call Social Security to update their benefit amount. So that's one thing
Right.
that, yeah, that's one thing we always look for when we are helping families after the loss of a loved one, is to not assume that benefits are what they should be, that we actually call Social Security. We're going to get on the phone with a rep there. They're going to be able to explain the difference in payments and how they calculate all that. Um, the funeral homes notify Social Security of a passing, but they do not notify that there should be a change in benefits. So that's
Right.
where common misconception is,
Right.
that those are two separate notifications.
Yeah, and I I love what all the things that the funeral homes do, and it's just so sad that so many funeral homes believe that there's nothing else to do. Uh, I've been at so many conventions and talked to so many people, and they're like, "Well, what do you do for families after the funeral's over?" And when I mention Social Security, the first thing out of most funeral directors' mouth is, "Oh yeah, we already take care of that for families." And I'm
Yes,
like, "No, yes, obviously you make the death report, but that does nothing for those benefits, for the last payment, for so many other things." And they really need someone to help them navigate it because it's confusing. Nikki,
absolutely.
what would happen if two people were married and then they got divorced, at age 60, 65, whatever, and then that spouse passes away? Does the person was that the surviving spouse, which is now the surviving ex-spouse, can they get any kind of benefits, or is it only current spouses?
So you mean if someone divorced and then they passed away? Yeah. So one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that if you've been married long enough to your spouse, you can still claim off of their Social Security benefits, even if they have
Right.
a current spouse or you have other marriages in your past. It's all based on the record, from when you were married. So we could have one spouse that's living, she lost her husband. He had a spouse from 10 years ago. They could both draw on his record legitimately
Right.
as in certain circumstances, and it would not affect one another's benefits. Like they would still be getting the same amounts. There's not like a, oh, we're going to pay this wife, but not this one. As
Right.
long as you're married long enough. So the flip side is I've seen a couple who were married for 8 months and then he passed away. They weren't married quite long enough, which is a
Right.
9-month mark. And so she actually wasn't entitled to any of his benefits,
Right.
but the ex wife was.
And I've seen this play out with funeral directors in the arrangement room, right?
Yes.
Where there's just like, oh, the ex-wife is going to try and claim benefits, the current wife is going to try and it's okay. You can
Button
both claim
heads.
benefits. In fact, I've had families tell us like, just don't talk to that ex-wife, right? They're going to try and get my benefits. Like they're not going to get your benefits; they'll get their own. It's totally separate. So funeral directors who understand that they can each claim their benefits separately can really diffuse that situation. Be like, what benefits you get are based upon your relationship. They have to be married for at least 10 years, right?
Yes.
If they're going to be someone who is divorced. But that also protects women who, might have supported a spouse through life, and then at the last moment they got divorced, and now she doesn't have any benefits. Maybe like a stay-at-home mom situation, right? I think that's why that law was originally written in. So and
Absolutely.
obviously there's lots of different situations and scenarios where they can get it. And so it is really important to talk to someone who's an expert, and not the funeral home just cannot tell people they need to stop. They need to stop saying we take care of Social Security. You don't. You take care of the
It's true.
death notification. Really important. You don't take care of Social Security. There's so much more to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a whole lot of little details underneath the widow benefits that I think we'll kind of get to later on as well, some little caveats
Okay.
and a few things there. I would like to explain SSI before we go deeper into widow benefits because they are actually
Wonderful.
separate. They're separate benefits from a retirement benefit. So what we commonly see is, so I'll explain it first. The Supplemental Security Income Program is basically a government program for people who don't have work history or they've been disabled most of their life. They are eligible to claim an SSI payment in their retirement years to help them, get through life and pay for things. But it is different from a retirement benefit. It's usually much, much lower. They have to be 65 or older or have certain disabilities or be one of the disabled children of a person who's passed away, to be able to qualify for those. So SSI, it is possible that you would have a spouse who had worked their whole career and a spouse who stayed home and never worked, so they don't have their 10, their 40 quarters. And the spouse in retirement age would be collecting an SSI benefit while the other spouse collected retirement. But then at the passing, this is where it gets confused. When the main income earner passes away, that SSI benefit should convert to a survivor benefit on the retirement record. So, did I explain that well, Matt? It's confusing.
Yes. Yes. Now, the only thing, there are SSI benefits for people who are not retired. It's just part of the disability benefits, correct?
Yes, if they're in disability or they are children who have been declared disabled. So, yes, that is
Right.
possible to be out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in my LinkedIn page, I have a pinned story, Earl's story, and in that, I was actually helping deal with SSI benefits for a 22-year-old kid, and because he'd always been disabled, right? And so yeah, disability payments, SSI payments do happen that way. But yes, surviving spouse, it's not the same as regular Social Security. So there's no surviving spouse benefits on an SSI payment.
Yes, it's basically a welfare program within the Social Security system. So it has
Right.
different metrics that they determine during that. So I'll just bring it up only because sometimes letters can be triggered to spouses who were on SSI that they'll lose
Right.
their benefits when their loved one passes away. But it's
Right.
just Social Security sending out a form letter that says things are changing, and it's very confusing.
Yeah, and I think the confusing part is, widow's benefits, widower. I mean, it can go both ways, right? But
Yes.
we use antiquated terms still. So widow's benefits are typically, the higher of their own benefits or half their spouses when they're alive, or the higher of theirs or their spouses when that spouse passes away. But SSI benefits do not factor into that equation. And so I have seen the case where the SSI benefits were much higher because they were disabled. And then they were expecting to get that higher amount, and they're not getting that higher amount because they're not disabled themselves. It only goes
Yes.
off the retirement calculation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's right on. So that can be confusing. And as you can tell, even we get to this slide, why do families need help? It's because every single category within Social Security, when we talk about, has so many different factors and so many different ways it could go depending on situations, that it can be difficult to navigate. Their letters are confusing. A lot of times they get somebody on the phone, and even how it's described can be confusing. They get mixed or false information regarding, like I said, sometimes Social Security sends out form letters just as part of their process that don't really make sense. So where the position we play in that is with our service-based aftercare, is that we can look at all those things and help define for the family what it means and what needs to happen next.
Right.
So you could probably speak really good to this slide, Matt. We've both worked with a lot of families. The questions they have: what payments can I keep? That's probably one of the top, don't you think?
Absolutely. Which payments do I keep? A lot of people are under the impression that they'll still get theirs and their full spouse's benefit, not one or the other.
Yes.
That is a huge one. How it affects Medicare and Medicaid, really, really big. The lump sum death benefit is super confusing. It's only paid to a current surviving spouse. So we talked about the, widow or the divorcees and things like that. That doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to children. It doesn't apply to any other situation, only to the survivor. There's also this misnomer that that's supposed to cover funeral costs, and that at one time that's what funeral costs cover. I don't see any evidence of that, being the reason. It's just one lump sum death benefit, and $255. It's almost not worth the hassle to do it, but most people still do it. And you do. The good news about that is you do have to link the work records in order to get that. But then once you do that, then you get all the other benefits, right?
Yes.
So if you're not going to get any other survivor benefits, it's only $255. Sometimes it's more work than it's worth. And then that process of like how to link those work records, how to start claiming it, it just feels really overwhelming. Like they're going to make a misstep. They're not going to know what to do. They're going to get underpaid. And with 82% of them being underpaid, it's kind of founded in truth, right?
It is.
It's a reality.
Real fear. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, within all of that, there are a lot of unique circumstances. So we'll go into a little bit more on the 255, because I have seen where it will pay out to an adult disabled child. The 255 benefit,
Right.
if there is no surviving spouse, but that child had to have been diagnosed and be deemed as disabled before they were 22 years old. So
Right.
yes. And then that, in that circumstance, that child is actually able to claim from a parent's work record to help them survive for the rest of their life, which is an amazing program.
Great point. And I kind of even forgot about that just now. So that's such a good point to bring up.
Yeah, so that's like one of the only other ways you can get the 255. A lot of
Yep.
families think it's just payable because someone died. Like the family will just get the 255, and that's not true. It is payable in certain conditions to certain people. So
Absolutely.
Now, what happens when there are children under the age of 18 when their parent passes away? This is something I know a little bit about in my own life,
Right.
but this is one of the most precarious situations that families are in, where they have I mean, it's not just the widows that are left without a husband who was the wage earner, but when a working parent passes away and they have a bunch of kids who are all underage, what do they do? Like, this is one of the biggest things that we help with, is help them iron all that out, make sure the benefits are all there, because all of those kids until they're 18 are going to be eligible for benefits, as well as the
Right.
spouse. If the spouse is working full time, they might not be able to draw the benefit, but that actually doesn't stop the children from receiving the benefit. And so it's really, really important to meet with someone who understands the process, who understands what benefits should be there, and how they can capitalize and plan for the future for those kids.
Right. Right. And exactly how those are going to be paid out. They have to be paid out to a guardian, and
Yes.
and what does that mean for your income limitations, and
Yes.
all sorts of different scenarios there, that if you're going it alone, that is really scary situation, because now you have the kids involved, and this is very, very important to take care of them. So it's so important that the family is not going this next step alone if there's children or a disabled child who's an adult over 18, right?
Yep.
All of those things are very, very important.
And that brings up the rep payee idea, which wasn't a slide back, but we kind of bypassed it. I'll talk about it here. A rep payee is kind of like a power of attorney, but it's the Social Security version of that. Like, it's a person who is able to take funds for people who are underage or the elderly who aren't well enough to speak for themselves. So Social Security has their own process on deeming who the rep payee should be and how that is set up. So that's another thing that requires an application for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, here's the slide. The representative payee.
Wow.
Forgot it was on the next one. So the rep payee, Social Security doesn't care if you already have power of attorney set up. They have their own process, and you have to get it set up on their process, or they won't pay out that way. But there are a lot of times, like I said, when there's kids involved, when there's the disabled children who are now adults, but also when you have a surviving parent. Say you lost one parent and the parent that's left has dementia, or they have Alzheimer's, they have some type of medical something that makes it hard for them to take care of themselves. You actually have to apply to be able to speak for them through and to Social Security.
Right.
I think this is our second to last slide. So
okay, before we jump into this, there's one other thing that we didn't cover. And I was recently up in Maine talking to onboarding several funeral homes up there, and the manager there was so mad because he didn't understand the last payment. He had been trained to tell everyone, hey, that Social Security is going to send a payment. Don't touch it. It's going to be pulled back again, because that you don't get that now that they've passed away. Is that, I mean, that's true. They shouldn't touch it. But what should happen with that last payment? Is it true that they never are due that last payment?
That's not true at all. In fact, it happens quite often that they're not due that payment, but there's very specific parameters. So Social Security pays in arrears. So if your loved one dies in the month of April, then the payment that comes in the month of April is actually for March.
Right.
So that payment they are due. They should keep that. Now, if they live all the way through the month of April to May 1st, they have every single hour in the month of April, they're still alive. They die May 1st, they will still get a payment from April because they lived the whole month. Right. And that will come in May. But if they pass halfway through the month, they are not entitled to the next payment that comes. There's no prorating. There's no, I mean, Social Security, if you don't live the whole month, you don't get it. And they will take that one back.
Yeah. So for example, if I'm meeting with a family and the person died March 31st at 11:59 p.m.
I've had it happen.
They don't get a payment in April, right? They don't get their April payment. The Social Security will pay it because it'll be too late, and then they'll realize they've paid it and they'll pull it back. But if they died 1 minute later, so now it's April 1st, at 12:01 a.m., they get that March payment. But what happens is the funeral director tells them, hey, don't worry about it. It's just going to get put in and pulled back out. And that's what happens. It gets in, pulls back out, but they are due that payment.
Yes.
And so they have to fill out Form 1724 in order to claim it, because the payment's no longer going to go to the deceased. It now needs to go to the heirs of the estate, whether that be a spouse or children or whatever the way the state is named. And so it's a really simple thing, but Social Security gets out of paying a lot of people because they don't know about that rule. And unfortunately, too many funeral directors are telling people, yeah, just don't worry about that last payment, when it's only a simple form to fill out and they can claim that payment, which that's going to, hey, that might be $2,000 or $3,000. That would go a long way in paying for that funeral or helping with final expenses or whatever. So it's very important that people understand that rule.
Absolutely. I've seen too many times where, and especially if there's an adult disabled child that's living with the parent who passes away and they were receiving, the benefits they were receiving monthly is actually paying their bills monthly. They're living paycheck to paycheck. It's very, very, very hard on the families when a payment is taken and they have to apply for it. They have to wait for it a little while to be put back in. It's a mess. But as long as I know what to expect and know how to handle it, it gives a lot of peace of mind.
Right. So why do you think Social Security is something families are frequently most concerned about?
Well, we're all concerned about money. So the more tight our budget is, the more we're concerned about money, right? And so I see it every day. Spouses who are elderly, they're retired, they're living on this budget. A lot of people in our country are only living on their Social Security retirement check. And if they're paying a massively huge Medicare supplement plan, and that's going to come out of their bank account too, and they have to wait for that to be reimbursed, it's really stressful. If we can take any of the stress out of the family so that they can understand what to expect, education is huge and it helps.
Right. Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, this is their lifeline. This is absolutely the most important thing. And without it, they're dead in the water, right? So it's so important that the family understand Social Security, and they're not going it alone, right? Because 82% is way too many. 1% is way too many people to not get their Social Security benefits after someone's passed away.
Absolutely.
So what can a funeral home do to better support families trying to navigate Social Security?
Well, they can send them to us and we'll help them. No, but every funeral home can, like the very, very basic, I know I had to throw that in there. The very basic thing is to make sure that people know they need to call and verify they're getting the correct benefit.
Yeah. The thing is you can tell people this all day long, but this is one thing every family needs their handheld. And I don't care if it's a hospice family, a funeral home family, everybody needs someone to walk them through this step, because this is so stressful. It's so important, and people mess it up so much that even if you don't do any other type of aftercare, this should be the one thing you do. You should have someone dedicated to helping families with at least Social Security. All the other stuff is so important as well. And that's why we started this company, right? But have some kind of a resource where people don't have to go it alone. We got this call or a letter from a family out of California, and the lady was like, I didn't realize how great your funeral home was. And I guess her brother-in-law had passed away not long after her own husband had passed away. And so her sister-in-law called her and said, how did you deal with Social Security? I tried calling them and I was on hold for 8 hours yesterday. I don't even know where to start. And I didn't get anything done. I didn't get any movement even after those 8 hours. And she's like, oh, well, the funeral home did that for me. Or the funeral home didn't just do it for me. Like, Kathy got on the phone and helped me with it, which was our aftercare specialist, right? From her perspective, it was just a funeral home employee. And she's like, I didn't realize what a big deal this was until I saw someone else struggle with it on their own, right? And
Yeah.
and nobody should be sitting out there 8 hours on the phone. And yet, when this family realized what the funeral home had done for her in helping her get all of her Social Security benefits and closing everything out for her husband, she was already dealing with the grief of the loss of her husband, but in all of her financial means and Social Security and that as well. And she didn't have to because they had a good service-based aftercare program in place. And that's what funeral homes ultimately need. They need a resource that are going to help families with those next steps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we also educate on planning for the future with the surviving family members so that they can be aware of what's going to happen. They can plan for what's going to happen in their own lives. And sadly, a lot of times people don't understand how important that planning is until they lose a loved one.
Right. Right. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add about Social Security? I mean, I could probably talk for an hour, but everyone will probably start nodding off because it's really boring unless you're like me and you know all of these things that you can share. But
I'll just say this, like whether you're our client or not, even if you have no interest in adding full circle aftercare, if you get a family in there and they have a Social Security question, give us a call. I'd be happy to answer the Social Security questions in depth because things get complicated with different family situations. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to be the one who told that family the wrong information. So make sure you're giving some kind of information and make sure it's accurate. And if there's a weird situation, reach out to me or Nikki. We'd be happy to give you that advice and tell you exactly what's going on because we're doing this for thousands of families a month, right?
yes.
And this is our life. This is what we're dealing with. So anyway, Nikki,
Absolutely.
once again, you've shown your absolute expertise. And you even filled in the part that I had forgotten. See, this is why I keep you around because you're just so good. But families
we
love
do
it.
that for each other. So
And this is what our state specialists do. They help people, and that's what service-based aftercare is about: is helping people navigate those next steps. It's hard enough dealing with this, and it's boring and complicated enough for any of us. But when you're grieving and your whole world is falling apart, trying to deal with this too is too much. And so I think it's every social worker and every funeral director's job to really understand these things because families need to know it and then have a program in place to help them.
yeah, those people who do those jobs, they really are the first line that the family's going to hear from, and they really are the
Right.
trusted resource. It's important to give them the right information.
Right. Okay. Well, we will see you. Let's see. I think it was April 24th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to reach out via email.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Nice to see
everyone.
you guys.
See you next week. ICCFA. Come see us.